Shalom, friends. Rabbi Bradley Shavit Artson from the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies, American Jewish University in Los Angeles, also the Dean of the Zacharias Frankel College at the University of Potsdam in Germany, training Masorti rabbis for Europe. I want us to take a moment to think about one of the puzzles that runs all the way through the liturgy, both of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. You know, the classical trilogy of the Musaf service, the afternoon part of the service, is to speak about three things: Zichronot, which is memory, and Malchuyot, kingship or sovereignty, and Shofarot, the redemption of the future. The first and the third are the easy ones. Of course, we all want to affirm our shared memories and our common heritage, and we all look to a better future. But I want to think for a moment about the ongoing value of the one that can trip us up, and that is the idea of God as sovereign. And some of us affirm that close to literally. None of us think that God is a king the way that Queen Elizabeth of Britain is a queen. But we think there's something that's useful in the metaphor of monarchy that points us in a direction. I'd like to highlight three of those possibilities. The first is that kings govern often by force. And we do live in a world in which we don't choose to be born, as the Mishnah says. We don't choose things that happen to us in life, all of them, and we don't choose whether we die or not. These things are built into the universe, and we have to meet the universe as it is. So when we speak about God as Melech, as sovereign, we're saying there's a reality that we have to meet, and we have to respond to, and we get to make choices within certain constraints, but we have to admit that we don't set the constraints. Second thing about a melech in the biblical world is different than a tyrant, a dictator. A melech, a monarch, is supposed to be a force of unity and of justice. And so we are saying that for us, God is that figure of unity and justice, that God brings us together, reminds us to stick with each other, and reminds us that authority has to have purpose, that it has to lead to compassion and equity and fairness, that God is the one who fights for the widow and the orphan and the outcast, and we expect that from a melech, a king. And then finally, we understand that melech is a metaphor for the reality that it isn't anything goes, that there are some things that we lean towards or yearn for, and in that sense there's an inner melech, there's an inner king guiding us along the way, choosing right over wrong, goodness over evil, purpose over random chaos. So when we speak about God as king, we're really saying we live in a purpose-driven universe, and that we want to align ourselves with the forces of righteousness and compassion and justice, and we want to feel those forces flowing from within our souls out into the broader community, out into the world. So my blessing for all of us, friends, is that on this day, in this season of real reaffirmation and recentering, that we remember that we live in a universe that is not purely random, that it has been growing in complexity and in patterns over these last 14 billion years, that on this day, as we celebrate not only God's sovereignty but the birth of the world, that we want to affirm that we choose to be loyal to forces of morality and compassion and goodness that build us into a community of caring, a covenant community, and that we want to, in that sense, crown God as sovereign, to be able to say that we pledge our loyalty to righteousness and decency and goodness, and that we affirm that we live in a world that invites us towards greater connection, greater covenant, greater relationship. Shana Tova, everybody. Blessings for a wonderful year.